Good evening. Welcome to Elyria City Council. We're back in council chambers here tonight. It's been a long time. I think we all feel at home here, so we are actively keeping our social distancing here. But I think it's good to be back in council chambers to kind of get back to business here with the city of Elyria. So with that, I'll take a moment of reflective silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Baird, would you leave us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Mr. Baird.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Baird. Mr. Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Sir, Mr. Callahan.
Here.
Mr. Sarah.
Here.
Mr. Oswald.
Here.
Mr. Baird.
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Here.
Mr. Salette.
Here.
Mr. Madison.
Here.
Mrs. Davis.
Here.
Mrs. Keys.
Here.
Mr. Jesse.
Here.
Mr. Stewart.
Here.
All present.
Public hearings.
You are hereby notified that a virtual public hearing will be held on Monday, July 6, 2020 at 7 p.m. to consider the following. Notice is hereby given that copies of the proposed tax budget, estimated encumbrances, balances, estimated revenues, and estimated expenditures of the City of Elyria, County of Lorain, State of Ohio, for the calendar fiscal year of 2021 will be on file beginning Friday, June 26, 2020, in the offices of the City of Finance Director and the Clerk of Council, and will be available for public inspection by contacting the finance or the council offices pursuant to the requirements of the law. The proposed tax budget indicates the estimated revenues, estimated encumbrances, balances, and estimated expenditures for the year 2021. The public hearing will be held for the purpose of discussion of the proposed tax budget. All interested citizens will have the opportunity to give written and oral comments. In order to participate in this meeting, you must contact the Clerk of Council office 72 hours prior to the meeting at 440-326-1550 to make any necessary arrangements.
Are there any proponents?
Thank you, Mr. President. Ted Pileski, Finance Director, City of Elyria, 131 Court Street, Elyria, Ohio. What you have before you is the 2021 tax budget. We are required by law to pass this in July of the prior year and submit it to the Lorain County Budget Commission.
I know it's coming.
So what this represents is our first attempt at estimating by fund type how much cash we will have in each fund type at the end of this year and the amount of estimated revenue for next year. It will be amended at the end of the year to replace the estimated cash with actual cash at the end of the year, and amended as we see fit as revenues come in or don't come in next year. So upon your approval, I will submit it to the Lorain County Budget Commission. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Pileski? Are there any proponents? Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? I declare this public hearing have been held.
An ordinance adopting the tax budget of the City of Elyria, Ohio, for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2021, and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell?
I make a motion that this before.
Moved by Ms. Mitchell,
Second.
second by Mr. Madison. Any discussion? Questions have been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Hold on in the emergency.
There's an emergency as well.
There's a suspension as well, I would guess, then. Ms. Law Director Deary?
Yes, Mr. President, suspension and also an emergency due to the deadline submitting it to
Sure.
the county.
I'll amend my motion to include, an emergency and suspension of rules.
Moved by Ms. Mitchell,
Second concur.
second by Mr. Madison. On that, on those amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
On the emergency, too, as well, Mr.
On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-73. That's all for public hearings?
Jeez. Public hearings,
That's all for public hearings?
approval of the minutes
So moved, Mr.
by
President.
Ms. Mitchell. Second by Mr. Tolet. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Remarks and reports from city officials. Mayor Whitfield will not be able to be with us this evening, so Director Firestein and Assistant Safety Service Director Brubaker will fill in his role to make discussions tonight. So Director Firestein?
To the chair, to members of council and the public, I appreciate you bringing everyone back together. It's nice to see everyone's smiling faces. Well, what I think are smiling faces underneath the mask. But instead of faces on a screen, we're here and doing our best to get through it, and I appreciate that. So the mayor could not be here tonight. He's under doctor's care right now on so he's working on that with his doctor. So what we wanted to do is address a little bit about what was spoken at last week's meeting. Trying to work on that. And so what we're going to do, Director Brubaker and myself, Director Brubaker is going to give you kind of what has happened in the last few months and where we are at this point, and then I will pick up the end and talk a little bit about what we are looking at going forward, especially a lot of the conversation that we had last week regarding rentals, leases, those kind of items. But I will yield my time to Director Brubaker if you will allow that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Firestein. Through you, Mr. President, to City Council. In early May, we had to make a tough decision to not only lay off several individuals in our Parks and Rec Department, but we moved pretty much everybody out of the Parks and Rec Department. We either moved them to other entities, other areas. We were able to keep 2 of our full-time employees. And if you remember, we moved those 2 employees over to the Building and Lands Department, as well as 2 full-time employees from cemeteries over to Building and Lands. And we already had 2 employees that were in Building and Lands. And what we've done since that time frame is what those 6 individuals have done, along with Tammy, who's done a lot of the paperwork in the Parks and Rec Department downstairs, as well as 2 part-timers. In the short time that we've been able to work this through and figure out what we're going to do, we've handled 22 full services at Brookdale Cemetery. When I say full services, that is broken down between cremains as well as full burials. When I took over on the 15th of May after Mr. Given had retired, they were just doing roadside services, meaning that the casket would come out, they would set it on a cart at the roadside, they would do the service right there, and then our folks would take the casket up, put it in the vault, and the vault guy would take it up and place it in the grave. That was for a multitude of reasons. Weather was one, COVID-19 was the other, with the regards to having less than 10 people from the governor. Shortly thereafter, when the governor released some of those restrictions, we went back to having graveside services. We did get a lot of concerns from family members that are used to having that, so we did reinstitute that. Mind you, we did that with 2 individuals out at Brookdale. Those 2 individuals have handled basically the mowing of Brookdale, as well as the services, as well as the headstones and the other things that come along with that. We have the 3 cemeteries in the city. I've been able to utilize the other 4 individuals, as well as the part-timers, to keep North Murray Ridge cut Ridgelawn, I will give a lot of kudos to Mr. Ryan Winborn, who is our custodian here. Because City Hall has been closed, we haven't had to clean and empty trash as much. So when he's not here, he's taken Ridgelawn as his own, and he'll go over there and spend part of his day cutting the grass over there. It takes him a full week plus of half days sometimes to mow that entire cemetery, and by the time he gets done, it's start all over again. On top of that, Ryan and Brett Schneider and one of the part-timers are responsible to maintain the crocks and the donated, which has the flowers on the ground level, and the hanging baskets that were purchased by residents. Those get watered every day. Obviously, we used to be able to do it over the weekends when we had part-timers working. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that at this time due to we're trying to keep costs down. Which brings me to the reduced overtime. I've worked with Mr. Farrell to make sure that we're reducing the overtime, specifically with those. We had a little blip early on, and we were able to reduce that now. The only overtime they're getting is if it's an emergency situation. We also placed, the mayor directed us to put together some signs. So I had 25 of these signs that were made up. These signs were given to us, or the format was given us to us by the Lorraine County Health Department. The only thing we added in is the city logo. We had 25 of these made up. They have ceramics here. And Mr. Horwood went out last week and placed these at all the playgrounds, at the ball fields, as well as the splash pad, to give them an indication of, we don't have people there to babysit you, but here are some guidelines that you need to follow in order to participate and do things in our parks. We do have something else that we're working on for the basketball courts in particular. We were going to put the basketball hoops back up last week. Due to the uptick in COVID cases, particularly here in the county, the mayor and staff decided to hold off on that to try to get a grip on where this whole increase and whatnot is going to go. We've maintained downtown, cutting the park, cutting East Falls, making sure the trash is emptied. I know there's a lot of trash on Broad Street at times, and I'll just be very frank, no pun intended. I can send 2 part-timers down Broad Street at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning and clean it up, and by noon, it's right back to the way that it is. But they do the best that they can with the personnel that we have to do that. We've also, we take care of the high grass complaints. The complaints come in. If they have to be cut, these guys are taking care of that, particularly the part-timers and Mr. Schneider. We have 312 vacant lots that we take care of. We've been fortunate that we cut them low enough in late May that pretty much, or mid-June, that we haven't had to do them as much, but that's coming around again, and we try to do those every 3 weeks. Splash pads, those are open and operating. Every morning, Jay and Mark are checking those to clean up the trash, make sure the porta potties are stable. If we have to put toilet paper in there, we will, but we're making sure they're not getting pushed over, which, by the way, last week it was stated that we spent about $1,600 just to sanitize the porta potties. That $1,600 is paying for all 9 porta potties that we have in our parks and the sanitation. That's for the entire summer. So that's not a continuous fee. We'll spend about $1,600 to have those porta potties, and they get sanitized once a week. Pavilion rentals. We've just started the last couple of weeks renting the pavilions, which also allows us to have the porta potties out there. We have our bathrooms open. That requires a whole different sanitation process. Hopefully with COVID money that Mr. Pileski got in today, we could use some of that money to pay to have those sanitized, because that was not something we budgeted for. Just as an update, we have a new playground going in at South Park. That's been ongoing for the last couple weeks. The tennis courts at South Park are expected to be finished. I know they were getting ready to put the poles in and the nets that will go up. And if I'm not mistaken, even though that's not a part of what I'm involved in, I believe the trails were recently bid out, and that project is moving forward. And we have some of the issue $6 that were allocated from the Parks and Rec master plan to help with some of the parking lots that are in poor shape. Those are going out to be done as well. So with all that being said, in the last 2 months, these 6 guys plus 2 part-timers have been able to keep up on what's going on. It's certainly not an end-all to save all. This is certainly not a direction we want to be in, but it's a direction that we're there. I can tell you that we've gotten, a lot of people have been thankful about the looks of the cemeteries. And again, the kudos goes out to Chad and Tom our AFSCME people, and then Ryan, again, over at Ridgelawn. Brett and a part-timer take care of North Murray Ridge. So we're moving people around to accomplish the things that need to be done outside. The inside, since we're not renting facilities, we're really doing nothing with those. Jay is checking those daily, make sure we're not having issues. He's keeping the pumps running on the pools. We will probably shut those down at the end of July because we don't need that. We've had some issues where kids are going over the fence and pulling the tarp back and getting in the pool. That is a liability to us. So that's pretty much what we've been doing and keeping up on. So we've not gone stagnant. Things are getting accomplished. Things are moving forward. They're certainly not moving forward as fast as the mayor and the administration and obviously you folks and the citizens would want, but dealing with what we're dealing with, I think we are keeping our head above water. So with that being said, I will leave that to council if you have any questions for me.
Any questions for Mr. Brubaker regarding the information he's provided? Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. President. First off, very good. That's what I like to hear, is a good, lots of words, but the report you give. I want to hear that every time we have a meeting, so we can keep abreast of what's going on. My question is that the people that were interested in, how are they handling that situation? Is there somebody that calls in, they call into a certain area, or are you not doing that anymore?
Mr. President, through you, that is, Tammy is handling those down in the Parks and Rec Department. So if they contact the Parks and Rec Department, the main line, they will get Tammy and she can set them up. We're still doing it half days, full days, same as before, and the signage is out there to direct them on the guidelines to follow. And then if there is a rental, Jay and the team is made aware of that, so the next day or the following work day, they can get out there and empty the trash so it doesn't stay stagnant.
Anybody else have any questions for Director Brubaker?
Making it easy on me tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Brubaker.
Thank you.
I'll follow up with Director Firestein.
Thank you. I hope all the questions then don't come to me, but I will try my best to match that. You know, to kind of go off of what Director Brubaker had said, you know, we're dealing with less people than we had last year and less pupil hours. I mean, we reduced overtime with COVID as well as the budget. It really impacted a lot of the deliverables that we are all, pretty much used to, and having to counter that, especially at a last minute thing when the pandemic really wasn't pre-planned. I mean, I hope no one kind of pre-planned it. Shows a lot of the dedication of Director Brubaker as well as the team that we have and trying to just deliver what we can. Now, moving forward, we have taken a lot of time to kind of review what this COVID situation looks like in terms of recreation and programming. And if anyone can figure that out, I would love to try to hire them, because you look at some of the professional leagues, they still have not to figure it out. You have tennis stars testing positive, you have golf players testing positive, you have NBA players pulling out, leaving millions on the table to not participate. So, we talked earlier, you have high school leagues looking at possibly doing football in the spring just because of what does that look like. And so I think a lot of the conversation that we had last week caused us to pause, and we were already pausing on, I think, the conversation we had last week about the facilities and rental. It wasn't so much we're going to give a bunch of groups the keys and let them go. No, there was going to be insurance thresholds. There was going to be check-ins. There were going to be stops. Going to just say, here it is. And perhaps, the failure for me was not communicating that properly with the members of council. And that's something that I know that I need to work on, and making sure we communicate that in a more effective way. But some of the concerns that were brought up by council made us pause and realize that there are some other things that we have to look at as well. And we are going to be taking a step back, and we're not going to be doing the rentals from here for the foreseeable future until we have some more very intimate conversations, not just with council, but our insurance team as well, to determine what the best fit is. Part of the reason is that, we talked to a few nonprofits through the area, reached out to the city of Lorraine. We found out that some nonprofits are taking their fields out because they don't want to have their activities indoors. Podcast I listened to said that, you're 20% more likely to contract COVID if you're inside than you are outside. So obviously, renting facilities out where you have people inside I just don't see that being the right move, and something that we had talked about before. And we want to make sure that we want to make sure that people are safe. We want to make sure they're protected. And we want to make sure we're doing it correctly. And so following that conversation last week, we want to kind of pause and take a step back and have some more intimate conversations with council and a few others to make sure that we're doing it correctly. In addition to that, I know the discussion centered on, a captain of the ship and that kind of thing, and we're going to be working on that as well. I think Director Brubaker has stepped up and done that, but we realize that his time is very valuable, and to continue that, we're going to need some help. How that looks and how the COVID funds that the city has received will look, that's going to be a conversation we have together, and how we go forward in that. So that's kind of a brief look at what we're looking at going forward. A lot of it is still, I don't want to say unknown, but we're doing our best to highlight that and try to move forward on that. And I'll do my best to answer any questions you may have. But I do appreciate your time and your listening. Thank you.
Right, and just to follow up with that, Director Firestein, I think it's the passion that we have for our Parks and Recs Department and the direction that it goes in is vital to our city. I mean, we've invested a lot of money recently with the passions of Issue 6 and all the monies that have been coming through from our hardworking residents to get where we're at. And I think, we want to have that direction, and we appreciate, the dialogue that we need to have to continue on that and keep in the loop of where we're going with things and that. So I would really stress that. So is there anybody you want to comment in regards to Director Firestein's? Okay, very good. Mr. Jesse?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Through you, thank you very much for the thought and care that's gone into these decisions. I think it's a very good idea that we put all rentals and use of indoor recreational facilities on hold. And it does give us a chance to reevaluate how we're going to start reopening and what that looks like in terms of our staff and also in terms of a director.
Mr. Jesse. Mr. Tolet?
Through you, Mr. President, I have a comment, then a question. Comment is on the new city website. Kudos to the administration. It is much more user-friendly, in my opinion, where all the phone numbers are listed on the front, on the very front. So hats off if you would let everyone in. Go ahead.
If I could just, all the kudos goes to Ren Flanders, Mayor's Chief of Staff. She did a phenomenal job, and she worked some long hours, and a lot of the praise goes to her and the team that she worked with on it. But she did an amazing job and deserves a lot of that praise. So I will pass that along. Thank you.
And then my question is, as you move forward with Parks and Rec, will that be interactive with council?
Yes.
Thank you.
I will make sure I communicate effectively with council to the best of my ability to making sure we involve as much input as we can to figure out what that path forward looks like. But inclusion is very important. To me, it's very important to make sure we have that kind of dialogue to making sure we're on the same page.
Thank you.
Anybody else in regards to, I know we're speaking, but the parks would seem to be the mainstay of that conversation, but so just in regard to there's been some discussion in regards to the parks and the fountain down below. I just want to make sure, and we talked about those fundings and those mechanisms that were placed on, I think it was March of 2020 this year. Are we moving forward with it in its entirety of finishing the fountain, the exterior seating and the capstones and the brick? I just want to make sure that we had some discussion today. I just want to make sure that that's moving forward.
To the chair, to members of council, that project is moving forward. Contracts were signed. The mayor's been working with the city engineer to making sure that gets continued. It's going to be at the timeline of the contractor. I know the bricks were on some type of delay, but they're going to work as much as they can to get that finished. So that is moving forward, and that was discussed even today with the mayor and city engineer. So that should be moving forward and completed.
Very good. We're glad to hear that. Very good. Mr. Baird?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. We're all very interested
I think it's unanimous. And I'd like to make sure we get updates, as Mr. Oswald has said, at every meeting, so we kind of know. Some of that's gonna, but when you see it out there working, you know something's happening, but when you don't see anything, we get concerned as the residents. So,
Understood.
just as a comment,
Yep,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
And then also, at this particular time, are you guys in the position to talk about maybe the opportunity to open up City Hall?
Yes, if I may, through the chair to members of council, we have a meeting set up this week I sent an email last week trying to schedule a meeting with the affected departments that would be here in the city, not affected, I don't want to get away from that word based on what we're wearing. The departments that are in City Hall, I want to make sure that we work with every department, especially finance and law, utility billing, and building, because those are going to be the main departments that people come in to visit. We want to make sure that not only are the visitors safe when they come in, I also, more importantly, want to make sure that our coworkers here are safe, because if they are infected, then we can't do the work that we need to provide to the residents. So we have a meeting this week to kind of discuss their thoughts, the pros, the cons of what they see, and how to make sure we do that correctly, and making sure we think of, anything we can to make sure that we have it protected, not just for the residents, but also our coworkers here. Going to come from that meeting,
Sure.
but we are moving
Sure.
forward on it.
Again, segueing to what Mr. Barrett and Mr. Oswald said, if you can kind of fill us in on the updates of that, because I'm sure all of us get inquired about when is City Hall going to open up, when are we going to be able to do, the things and we understand the precautions that need to be taken place. We're not making light of that, but I think we'd like to see, I know other communities are open, but I know we need to take the necessary precautions of where they're at. Anything else on the open platform regarding that? Mr. Madison?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, so I've got the fountain information here in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
What's the yellow document, and why is there certain things highlighted through you, Mr. President? Why is there certain things highlighted and some pages are not?
I don't have that, through the chair to Councilman Madison, I don't have that document in front of me, but I can try to find those answers and get those to you. I apologize, not knowing the document that you're working off of. I want to make sure I give you a correct answer, not just an answer. But let me work on that, and I will get you that answer.
All righty, because I guess the question is, I received some questions from certain residents wondering what is the actual cost of the fountain as a whole. A lot of people were mentioning that this was driven by donations, and so I know that question's out in the community, wondering what does that look like and what is the overall cost. I'm happy to know that we're moving forward with the project, though. I think that's important, and it's going to make a big difference when people can come downtown and see the fountain up and moving.
I will say through the chair, if I may, I know part of it is it's a mixture of donations, block grant funds, and Issue 6 funds, but I will get those breakdowns, the final cost of the contract, and get that not only to you, but the members of council, so you can see exactly what the contract was, and that way you can see exactly what was signed off on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Keys?
Through you, Mr. President, do we have a completion, an estimated time for completion of the project?
Off the top, sorry.
Mr. Schneider, if you would mind to come up and...
The fountain project is 120 days to complete. We have not had our pre-construction with our contractor yet, so we don't know the exact timeline. The bricks, as has been mentioned already, are around a 4 to 5 week delay, just to get the materials. So once we have the materials, the contractor can start working. Shouldn't take them long to complete, as long as everything's there. It was the first thing I was gonna talk about tonight was the fountain, so if you wanna hold off, that's fine.
Thank you. She said thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Ma'am. Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you.
Finance Director Plesky.
Thank you, Mr. President. As Assistant Safety Service Director Brubaker alluded to, we have received our portion of the CARES Act grant monies that came in late last week, a little over $1.6 million. So that money is in the bank and will be recorded in the special fund that you create tonight with the ordinance that's before you tonight, and they'll be ready to be spent. So Certainly anything related to the pandemic is eligible. For example, the sanitizing of the parks and what have you. Anything related in that regard is okay to pay. Still working through some of the guidelines as to what you can spend it on, what you can't, but we don't have a whole lot of time to spend this money, I don't think. So I have to brush up on that to see when we have to have it spent. If we don't spend it all, I know we have to return it, but I just don't know exactly when, so.
Okay. So we'll have those future discussions in regards to how we'll be able to spend that. Anybody else have any questions for the finance director? No? Thank you. Law Director Deering?
All right, we'll try this again. Members of council, I just wanted to bring to your attention that the matter of the renewal of the of issue 6, as we call it, is on the agenda this evening. There are 2 resolutions and 1 ordinance that relate to that. And as it is on the agenda, it's being requested that this be passed under suspension and also as an emergency, as this needs to be certified to the Board of Elections the beginning of August. Also, just briefly, I wanted to thank the members of my staff and also Chief Whiteley, Captain Poco, and the Detective Bureau at EPD for all of their work on the Days In matter, which you hopefully saw in the Chronicle, while we are still awaiting the official journal entry from Judge Cook's office over at Common Pleas Court. I can tell you that although we were just in court for a few days, this is something that's been worked on for probably the better part of a year. Although we were ready to file this prior to the pandemic, we had been getting data together, and really Captain Pelko and his team have been putting data together because state law requires a pretty big showing, actually a huge showing, in order to prove that a business is a nuisance. I'm very proud of my office, especially attorneys Sufjan Dola and Eric Brunig and prosecutor Scott Strait. They were actually the ones who were in court, and also the whole host of members of the police department who were in court and testified on behalf of this. So I just wanted to let you know that. And obviously, if you have any questions about any of these ordinances, I'll be sitting right over there. All right. And also, last but not least, Mr. Madison, I believe this is your last official full meeting, and I want to wish you the best, and you'll be missed.
Any questions for Law Director Deary at this time? Yeah, thank you. Please pass on our thank yous and efforts for you and your department, and continue that work that you do. I know it's tireless, but you guys do a phenomenal job, so thank you for your efforts with that. Just kind of, this is a little bit unorthodox for us because I know it's in a row. So I guess I'll just shoot for Engineer Schneider. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As discussed earlier, first thing on my list here to update council on was the Elyria, or the Ely Park fountain. We are moving forward with the project. The contracts have been signed, as the Safety Service Director stated. 120 days to complete the project. The pavers, 4 to 5 weeks lead time to get the materials in to complete it. In talking with the mayor today, he did instruct us to include the outer walls in the project. It will have the benches, it will have the placards and all the engraved bricks, everything that we were looking to install out there. We will put together a cost. I don't have all of last year's costs. I'll have to talk to Scott Budzaleski in our office, but we'll put together the numbers as far as how everything was paid for. There was some, not only a lot of the funding, most of the funding came through was the donations. There will be funding for block grant. There was some funding for the energy grant that we had last year, the NOPEC grant. So we did utilize some of that for some of the electrical items on the project. And then there will be a small amount of the issue 6 that will complete not necessarily the fountain, but the courtyard area, I would say. And then the East Rec Trail Improvement Project that started last week. If you weren't out by East Rec, so they are working this week, and it should take the remainder of this week and possibly a little bit in the next week to complete that project. So that trail will be the improvements will be completed on that project. The West Avenue, Lake Avenue Improvement Project, as well as the TLCI, which is kind of melded together in the whole downtown area. Currently, they're working over at the Broad Street, West Avenue intersection, that the eastbound and westbound lanes are currently closed as they plan to pour the concrete tomorrow for those the red stamp brick concrete. And then once that sets up, probably Thursday morning, they'll flip the traffic and close West Avenue, north and southbound, to complete the other 2 crosswalks. We will have a detour up, so just like when we've done it in the past, there will be detour around. So hopefully everyone will see that. And Chestnut Commons Connector Drive, I need to put these glasses on. Chestnut Commons Drive, Connector Drive, the construction started approximately 2 weeks ago. Contractor out there is going gangbusters. He's got multiple crews out there. He's doing everything he can to get that project completed this year, so as much as possible at least. Yeah, the traffic signals will definitely lag behind because of the lead time on the poles. Those things are under non-COVID times, 9 months to get those material. With COVID, it's even more. So that will be the only delay really in that project. The East Side Relief Sewer Phase 1C, they're currently, the Deep Dig Sewer Project, they're currently over at the intersection of Poplar and Abley, working through there. It'll probably be another 30 days to complete the Deep Dig sewer portion, but the restoration and the junction chamber for that sits on the old the Allen School property, that'll take some time to complete still. So we're hoping to get that intersection open before school starts this year. That's the plan. It might be maybe not fully improved to the point, but we'll do our best to get that open or make accommodations one way or the other for the school. The Northwood Complex on Abbey Road, the new Northwood, today they closed the southbound outside lane they're actually installing the skip lane or to turn into the facility over there. So that'll take probably 3 to 4 weeks to complete that. So that it will be, so Abbey Road will be restricted southbound to 1 lane in that area. So please, sorry. Please be aware that that's going to be happening and plan appropriately as far as leaving, because traffic is gonna back up. The East Avenue St. Mary's Way improvements, which is a water main replacement, sanitary sewer separation, as well as some improvements along East Avenue by the library. We bid those out last week, and bids came in very well. So we're going to move forward with that project. So you'll see that starting here in the near future. The resurfacing of West River Road South from Infirmary to 3rd Street, sorry. I think which one it was. So up to 2nd or 3rd, it's right in that area. That portion was bid out to Ohio Public Works. The remaining portion north of that is included in the street resurfacing. So it's all gonna be done all the way up to Filbert Street, but we did bid out the West River Road resurfacing. That came in well under budget, so that's a good thing. The street resurfacing Phase 1 was also bid out last week. Good numbers again, with the gas prices being down and everything else. So we'll be able to start that one hopefully soon. And the street resurfacing Phase 2, because we divided that whole list into two halves essentially, that will bid out next week. So we'll have the remaining streets bid out next week. And street sweeping, that was also completed, I believe, last week. So with that, I don't know if you have any questions.
Questions for Mr. Schneider? Mr. Sarah?
Through you, Mr. President, first of all, on phase one, when do you think they'll actually start? And then the second part would be, can we get a copy of what's on phase one and what's on phase two?
Sure, we can actually put it on the internet if that's,
Okay.
so people understand. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
As far as starting, until we just bid it out, so contracts are still going through the whole process. It's about 2 weeks to get everyone's signatures and all the paperwork together on a normal, everyday type of project, so.
Mr. Oswald?
Thanks, Mr. President. Just wondering how the wetland study got back on that connector road from Walmart to Broad Street. Did we have any issues?
No, it was very limited as far as the wetland impacts, so they were able to mitigate it as part of the construction.
Thank you.
Did you? No, good. Anybody else? Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Community development. Anybody want to report? Okay. Mr. I is here from the sanitation department. We had some limited discussion last week in regards to the sanitation truck and the purchase of that for discussion only. And Mr. I, if you'd like to just come on up to the mic up here and just kind of give us an update on that, but we're going to have this future referral to the council, but I think there were some questions that wanted to be asked here initially, and he'll be a part of those discussions moving forward.
Good evening. I'm Rodney I. I'm a Public Works Supervisor for the Sanitation and Forestry Departments. Just would like to give you a status of our equipment that we currently have. When we started the new automated system in 2010, we started out with 8 side-loading garbage trucks. And this coming December, it will be 10 years that we've actually been doing this automated system. And in the 10-year period, we've only purchased 4 trucks, 4 side loaders in that 10-year period. Well, the life expectancy of these trucks realistically is about 8 years. Well, we're going on 10 with them right now. And the trend is we're seeing is I currently have 1 truck out for repair right now. And when I say a repair, the packing system, the arm system, all of the hydraulic systems on the trucks needs to be replaced, rebuilt. We're looking at upwards of $40,000 just for 1 truck. And, you know, we have 8 of these original trucks, and if one goes bad, well, the other 7 are probably not far behind it. I hate putting a ton of money into a dead horse, but we've got to do what we've got to do. I would really like to see us get into some type of system where we can replace these on a yearly basis. If we're able to purchase one this year, I spoke with our vendor that we deal with, Best Equipment, and what I would like to do is actually trade 1 truck in when the new one would come in. And the trade-in value, he gave me a ballpark figure of anywhere between $25,000 and $30,000, which is not a lot of money compared to a $330,000 truck, but at least it's something towards it. We can get a little bit of return on our equipment. Another concern I have is our rear loaders. We have our rear loading garbage trucks. That's what we use for bulk pickup. I currently have 3 of those, and the newest one we have is a 2019. I have a 2015 and a 2013. So those trucks are getting some age on them too. That's something we're going to have to look at also in the future. So that's where we're at with equipment. I have huge concerns. I don't want to see the city get into a situation where we have to replace an entire fleet all at once, like we did when we started this automated program, and I believe that was well over $3 million when we started. So I did check, I did make a call today to the vendor we use, Best Equipment, just to see what the lead time is on a automated truck, and we're a year out. So if I order a truck tomorrow, it's going to be a year before we can actually see it in our parking lot and working.
So I just wanted to have Mr. I come up, kind of give us a look at, from his perspective, what he's facing. This is going to be referred to in item number 10, I believe it is, for a sanitation truck, and then, sanitation, have more discussion about that on item number 10. So he was here, he wanted to kind of have those concerns. Mr. I, if you can please come on the 27th for those other discussions.
Sure.
At that point. Okay?
And if anybody has any questions, feel free to call me or shoot me an email or whatever, and I'll be happy to answer.
Personally, if we're able to get out there, and if you guys want to take a visit of what the trucks look like, what we're up against, that might be a little bit more appealing to where we're at with these. So, thank you. Do you want to say anything, Mark, or you're good? Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. I. We'll let, please contact him if you have any other further discussion or questions for him. I think that covers everybody. I do want to, IT department, Mr. Rothgary, Mr. Henderson, Mr. Perez, I don't know if I've missed anybody, but a phenomenal job again. Corey is in the audience, out over and through there. They do a remarkable job, and I want to hats off to them on the job that they continue to do. It's unbelievable. So we get the best ones in the business. So thank you for that. President's referrals and remonstrances. Item number 1, Community Development Finance. Item number 2, Community Development Finance. Item number 3, Community Development Finance. Item number 4, Community Development Finance. Item number 5, Community Development. Item number 6, Finance and Community Development. Item number 7, Finance and Community Development. Item number 8, Finance and Community Development. Item number 9, Finance. Item number 10, Finance. Item number 11, Utilities. Item number 12, Utilities. Item number 13, Utilities. Items 14, received and placed on file, copied to all council members. Petitions and remonstrances from the lobby. Don't have that. Reports of standing and special committees.
Mr. President, we do have some, from the lobby.
All right.
And there's nothing from the council members as well. So I'll go to there's a few from the lobby. For Bill and Janet Bird, 235 Eastern Heights Boulevard. We are writing to express our surprise and concern that you are considering a program to offer downtown building owners 5 times as much money, $50,000, to demolish their buildings than you would offer to do building improvements, $10,000. Now, in the Chronicle Telegram article of July 1st, Dawn Calvert admits that there is no comprehensive plan behind these proposed demolition grants either. We feel that our city and its citizens deserve better than the continual shotgun approach to redeveloping our downtown. Here are a couple of ideas concerning money that apparently is available from Issue 6. First, create a good Main Street program that is affiliated with the Heritage Ohio. Heritage Ohio has all kinds of resources to help an older community redevelop downtown area. They also are connected with many developers who want older buildings and will make the necessary investments for renovation and adaptive reuse. Second, with the rest of the available funds, offer grants that require historically appropriate facade improvements and other similar repairs on buildings in the downtown area. In conclusion, we strongly encourage you to support a comprehensive plan where the older buildings in the downtown Elyria will be preserved through rehab and adaptive reuse to create a unique and special environment for all Illyrians. Sincerely, Bill and Janet Bird. This next one's from Mary Sawerka, 119 Fresno Court. Dear council members and city administration, as a lifelong Illyrian, former staffer, and a veteran of many budget ups and downs, I support the efforts to reestablish leadership in the Parks and Recreation Department. If the administration through that thought that there would be savings, they are wrong. The layoff of one employee for a few months after paying the unemployment and benefit costs is minimal and in fact may be a wash. However, exposure of having unprepared personnel in public facilities is much greater cost risk. The dismantling by the administration of the Parks Department is disturbing. It appears to be a concerted effort to redirect future of the department, ignoring any and already established goals, master plans, and/or community desires. Partnering with the outside organizations is terrific for programming, not operations of taxpayer properties and public staff. These welcome outsiders and have no knowledge of city protocols, building workings, or an understanding of the city's unionized workforce. The Parks Department leadership has been streamlined to the point of extinction. In the 1980s, 90s, and even the 2000s, there was a solid foundation of management/director with supporting assistant managers. It was not excessive or duplicate. They fell victim to general fund dollars. I urge council to involve the side-swiped Parks and Board as well. The board, wisely empowered by our city's charter, has a long-held reputation for supporting a strong department and its workings. They have demonstrated a history of doing just that since the 1950s. Elyria City Council and the Elyria Parks Board continue to demand a common-sense approach. Mary Sawerka. Next one's from Richard Stouffer, 423 Michigan Avenue. This email is in regards to the present situation with respect to the Parks Department. I realize that due to the coronavirus, the necessary of curtailing recreational programs could not be avoided. However, it is imperative that all Elyria Park land and buildings continue to be properly maintained, and construction projects also need to be completed. Communication, control, and coordination of park and recreation activities to keep the City Council, the Park Board, and the citizens of Elyria informed is important. Therefore, I'm in favor of returning the Parks Director from layoff status. Future activities, programs, and restructuring of the Parks and Recreation Department can be addressed once the present virus situation is resolved. In the meantime, Elyria needs to protect the Elyria Park system as a true asset for the city. Mr. Stouffer. And the last one is from Tamala Grubbs, 424 Tremont Street, and number 5. Dear members of council, as a resident of downtown and property in Elyria, the demolition program caught my attention. This program, like many others around the country, is to fight blight in low-income zone neighborhoods and generate economic development. The program may look like a good opportunity to rid ourselves of buildings that are decaying from years of neglect. Ask this question, is it the right program? How will this benefit the downtown? How many buildings would be eligible? It is not a question of the utilization of the funds, rather what it will do to the landscape of the downtown without proper planning and design guidelines. For a program that is kind, it should be in coordination with an economic development program, a program based on a well-thought-out plan or a vision for the downtown. Some of the options to keep in mind for development or before demolition are: 1, the building is not listed as an historical structure. 2, funding for proper infill is escrowed, proven. 3, the area after demolition isn't a gaping hole, i.e. the building demolished, I believe it says 155 Broad Street, but I can't make that out. Block building, the hole left behind the drops straight down to the Depot Street. 4, the building is beyond saving, buildings down if action is not taken. 5, funding or interest from others, organizations, or companies to save and rehab. Prior to voting, as a resident of the 5th Ward, I entrust the council members to request clarification on the demolition program and clearly define how it will combine economic benefits. Sincerely, Tim Grubbs. That is all from the lobby.
I want to thank those individuals who expressed their concerns in regards to that, and I would ask the clerk's office to forward that information over to the administration if we haven't already, so that they can address those concerns and questions for them. Reports of standing and special committees.
There are none.
Resolutions first reading.
resolution submitting to the electorates of the city of Elyria at the general election on November 3rd, 2020, the question of renewal of additional 5-year temporary annual municipal income tax of 0.5% to provide additional funds effective July 2021 and declare an emergency.
Mr. Madison?
Mr. President, I move this resolution be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules and declared emergency. Am I reading the right one?
Second.
All right.
Second by Mr. Jesse. Any discussion? Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Resolution 2020-15. Now on the ordinance, sponsored by Finance. An ordinance amending section 1, 3, 4, and 17 of ordinance number 69-54 as amended in order to continue an additional 5-year temporary annual municipal income tax of 0.5%, providing for the effective date thereof, and providing that the renewal of said additional 5-year temporary annual municipal income tax is subject to approval by the electors of the city of Elyria, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Madison?
Mr. President, I move this ordinance be passed under suspension of rules and declared emergency.
Second.
Second by Mr. Jesse. Any discussion? Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-74. Sponsored by Finance. A resolution of intent of the use and application of the revenues generated from the renewal of an additional 5-year temporary annual municipal income tax of 0.5% as approved by resolution number 2020-15.
Mr. Madison?
Mr. President, I move this resolution be passed under suspension of rules and declared emergency.
Second.
Second by Mr. Jesse. Any discussion? Mr. Jesse?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, just to kind of give you an update, I checked with Mr. Pileski. We have $7,500 in our campaign account, which is certainly better than the $1,100 we had when we started this 4 years ago. I intend to send you all a copy of every person and business that donated to Issue 6, and I'd like us to look through them and have you say, I have a contact here, I have a contact here. And we had to do it so quickly, there were many businesses that we didn't even have a chance to contact. So before the August meeting, I'll get that to you, and then I'd like you to just look at it, get back to me and say, I can talk to somebody here, and then throughout August, we can start that process. Just a thought to throw out, certainly, you know, nothing firm, but our motto before was Pride, and of course it was an acronym for the various things we were going to use. And I just throw out that we might want to use Pride 2 as a motto, because I think that was, people identified Issue 6 with Pride. It was on every piece of our campaign materials. And then Pride 2 just is what it is. And I might even say we could call it Pride 2, City Council Strikes Back. I think that's got a nice ring to it. So I will be sending you out sometime towards the end of this month. Might even do it now just so you have it. And then you can take a look and we can start our strategy for soliciting donations, particularly from businesses.
Sure. Mr. Baird?
Yeah, through you, Mr. President. It's interesting because we had some conversation about that, Dr. Jesse, and I just had that T-shirt on yesterday, the Pride, Elyria Pride, and it's all sweaty, and so I need a new one.
You can make that happen. Well, I think this is, obviously, we all know the importance of this moving forward for our city, what it means to our community, and I think we've been good stewards of the dollars that we've spent, and we have a lot of work ahead of us and a lot more, you know, moving forward with this. But if there's any divine intervention, if we can get Issue 6 back as our and the,
Well, I'm going to call the Board of Elections tomorrow and see if he has any suggestions for a strategy. So we'll roll the dice.
right, but, very good. We look forward to those conversations, and, more discussions with that, so, thank you. Any other further discussion? Question has been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Resolution 2020-16. That's all resolutions first reading.
Resolution second reading.
There are none.
Resolutions third reading.
There are none.
Ordinances first reading.
Sponsored by Finance. An ordinance amending ordinance number 2020-38, known as the 2020 Permanent Appropriations Ordinance, to change funds in various accounts.
Mr. Madison?
Mr. President, I move this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Jesse. Any discussion? Question's been called. On suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-75. Sponsored by Finance. An ordinance authorizing the Finance Director to create a new special revenue fund.
Mr. Madison?
Mr. President, I move this ordinance be passed under suspension of rules on its first reading.
Second.
Second by Mr. Jesse. Any discussion? Question's been called. On suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-76. Sponsored by Finance. An ordinance authorizing the Finance Director to submit changes on the allocation of the City of Elyria share of the inside 10 mil limit to the Lorraine County Budget Commission and declare an emergency.
Mr. Madison?
Mr. President, I move this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared emergency.
Second.
Second by Mr. Jesse. Any discussion? Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-77. Sponsored by Finance. An ordinance amending section 121.02, change orders, codified ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, and repealing existing section 121.02 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Madison?
Mr. President, I move this ordinance be passed on its first reading under declared emergency and suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Jesse. Any discussion? Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-78. Sponsored by Finance. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit an application to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and accept, if offered, the 2020 Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response SAFER Grant to be administered by the Elyria City Finance Department and the Elyria City Fire Department and declare an emergency.
Mr. Madison?
Mr. President, I move this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared emergency.
Second.
Second by Mr. Jesse. Any discussion? Question's been called. On suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-79. Sponsored by Community Development and Finance. An ordinance authorizing a two-party check made to applicant Carol Doer and contractor Koch Manufacturing, Inc. as an exception to the terms of the Downtown Facade Improvement Program.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Mr. Jesse. Any discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-80. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement to purchase a carbon feed system through the Ohio State Purchasing Program for the water pumping plant and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Any discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-81. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance amending ordinance number 2020-48, authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the 2020 street resurfacing project and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Any discussion? Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-82. Sponsored by Community Development and Finance. An ordinance establishing the Elyria Downtown Demolition Program.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on the suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Jesse. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Callahan?
Yes, Mr. President, thinking this one over, I think that we should make every attempt to encourage downtown property owners to explore and leverage grants and other funding opportunities so they can rehab their buildings whenever possible.
Is there any other further discussion? Oh, sorry, Mr. Sarah?
Through you, Mr. President, I think when we met on this last, there was a couple of questions raised. One was, do we know if there's anybody that's interested immediately? And another one was about the structure of the road and what some of the demolition would do to that, and were we prepared to handle that? Because looking at the Godless building came down, you know, it's pretty good drop-off, like the letter mentioned. We don't know for sure what's going to happen with that.
Yeah. Mr. Firestein?
Through the chair to Councilman Sarah, with each demolition, each project is usually unique in its own respect, and I think part of the program that makes it more appealing for the city is that we're going to have skin in the game, so it's going to have to be done at certain standards already, not only by our building department, but also for us to sign off on it. So those concerns of the road will be reviewed before and after, making sure that it's done properly and no structural damage to the road. But I can't speak to a project because there's not a building in front of me of what we're talking about in terms of that, but we will make sure, we're definitely not wanting to push a project that's going to cause road damage or anything of such. So we will make sure we do our due diligence before and after the project's done to ensure that.
Anybody else have any discussion regarding this? Mr. Baird?
Yeah, in our discussions, there was a lot of concern about that, and the guidelines are in the information that's in the ordinance. What we're trying to do is set up something we know we have some problems with some buildings that are almost can't be rehabbed. You know, they're out of code violations and so on. can't be fixed on a basis. What we're trying to do is set up a program that we could deal with this. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Putting something in place to give an option to their tear down properties and help those people who want the property in there, because it's a maximum of the 50,000. They might be putting in much, much more to build. So that was the basis of about that. I think
Through you, Mr. President. A follow-up question to that would be, if they apply for this, do they have to have some kind of plan in place to rehab that property immediately? Or is it gonna stay tore down for 10 years?
no, there is a time frame in it. I think it's 6 months, and then on beyond that, to a year, have action.
Have something done?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does that sound right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Baird, being on that committee as well, I mean, it was, the template was taken off the facade, downtown facade program, and we kind of tweaked that to our best, to the benefit we thought with the demolition. And to segue to what Mr. Baird had said, that, you know, some of these buildings are beyond repair, and it's just not worth, you know, investing the kind of money. So we're trying to help them along. So I think each situation will be unique to itself, and will have to be evaluated, but I think Mr. Oswald mentioned he may want to comment more on it, but the structural of these buildings as they're going through and applying for that. But I don't know if I think in the last committee, we talked about Ms. Calvert forwarding that information to that, and I don't know if that's been supplied. If not, we'll make sure that that is taken there. Mr. Madison's on that committee, if you want to weigh in on it as well.
Thank you. I just wanted, through you, Mr. President, to kind of echo and support some of the comments that Mr. Baird made. I know during the call, there was some questions that I had. One, was it enough? And then two, what support will we be giving downtown businesses? So we're not just tearing down buildings, but we're trying to figure out what does the future look like. And the administration did share that they're looking at trying to provide additional services and additional opportunities to apply for grants and really work with them to help us figure out what does that look like. So I really just wanted to add that to the conversation. And the last thing is the design review is already in place for downtown, so encouraging the administration to follow the guidelines that we've already put in place as it relates to the downtown infrastructure and building downtown buildings. Thank you.
Mr. Oswald?
I do a little bit of that kind of work, and I was, of course, against purchasing the building on the corner over here, the Powerhouse Gym, which we thought we were getting a real steal for that. Well, we weren't getting a steal because, which I knew, we were going to be spending a bunch of money. And now they find out that it could have cost up towards $4 million to redo that and to keep that historical building. Now, there's nothing wrong with tearing something down and bring it back to life as that same look. And that's what I did have a small conversation with the mayor, that you have to have a game plan. And it needs to be started right now and say, this is the look that we want for our city. We've already had the conversation on our library, which we wanted a certain style, and we didn't exactly get it. I don't think we did, but we have to stay consistent. And if we don't, then it's not good. But right now, when you redo a building and you try to keep all the same products, it's just very overcost, not effective. So you can still do the same thing, have the same look. But these people that are tearing these buildings down, they have something in mind. They're just not tearing them down. So I feel confident, you know, that when they do start doing something and we keep on them, just keep the same look. But I think you need to have a committee and the mayor saying that this is what we want to do and stay with that commitment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Very good. Is there any other discussion? Questions have been called to suspension. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-83. Sponsored by Community Development and Finance. An ordinance waiving the residency requirement of the Safety Service Director Derek Firestein pursuant to the sections 735.01 and 737.01 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second by Mr. Jesse. Any discussion? Mr. Oswald?
I just want to state, I think that Derek's doing a fine job. It is not about his job that he's doing, but I think the way that it was handled is wrong. We have laws in place, we have charters in place, and if we don't feel as a council here that it's important for that person to live and reside in the city of Elyria, we need to change that charter, and we don't need to keep waiving. But it was done, I think, at the wrong time. I felt when he was hired, he should have known this, and I'm not getting a direct answer as far as if that happened or not. So I just wanted to go on record saying that it's not about the job he's doing, but about how the charter rules. So thanks, Mr. President.
Through you, Mr. President, just a point of clarification, this is not a matter of city charter. The city charter does not specify that the Safety Service Director has to reside in the city of Elyria. There are two revised code, Ohio state law provisions that specify that the waiver requirement may be waived by ordinance within 6 months, and that's why we are here. So it's not a matter of city charter. Thank you.
Mr. Oswald?
So that's how it's always going to be. We couldn't change it just to the point where we would say you do not have to reside in the city of Elyria to take the job.
Through you, Mr. President, there are very specific requirements in the charter where residency is required. For instance, if you want to be an elected official, and I think the fact that it does not state that there is a residency requirement, therefore it's omitted, means that there is not a residency requirement. The reason that this matter is before you all as council is that the state law says that a waiver needs to take place if the Safety Service Director does not reside within the jurisdiction within 6 months of appointment. And that's why we're here.
Mr. Baird?
Yeah, along with that, with Mr. Oswald's comments, we do have a charter review commission that's here, and if we wanted to do that, they could look into it, decide whether that's something that they want to do. That's where it comes from. It starts from the charter review commission. I done that when I wasn't on council. That has to be voted on. That's the process.
Is there any further discussion?
I'll call for the question.
Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
One nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? One nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-84. Sponsored by Community Development and Finance. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an enterprise zone agreement with Big O Enterprises LLC for exemption of real and personal property taxes within the Elyria Enterprise Zone, created under ordinance number 91-71 and as amended in ordinance number 95-47.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under the suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sarah. Any discussion? Question's been called on suspension. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay on the passage. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2020-85. That's all ordinances, first reading.
Ordinance is second reading.
There are none?
Ordinance is third reading.
There are none.
Committee calls.
Community Development requests the Law Director, Safety Service Director, Engineer, and Building Inspector on 7/27, virtual if needed, at 6 p.m. Finance requests the Mayor, Finance Director, Law Director, Safety Service Director, and Engineer, 7/27/2020, immediately following CD, virtual if needed. Utility Safety and Environment request the Safety Service Director, Law Director, and Engineer, virtual meeting if needed on 7/22 at 6 p.m. And Strategic Planning request the Mayor, Safety Service Director, Finance Director, Law Director, 8/3/2020, virtual, immediately following regular council meetings.
But just for clarification, Mr. Clerk, virtual if needed or virtual, is that at our discretion if we want to have it in council chambers? Would you need to make that notification that now at this time? No. Or just at the, okay. All right, I just want to clarify that. All right. Thank you. Let's see, miscellaneous and unfinished business. The item of the matter of executive session for the purpose of discussion for personal matters is removed. I know there's been, I just want to kind of give an update to council members or what's been going on. We're still working through with the administration regarding the Elyria City Schools and the CIC. We're hoping that, I believe there's a meeting scheduled for July the 13th, which they will be meeting. I know it's been a little bit of time, but we're trying to work through some of those timings for individuals. So we're hopes that they can finalize that and have those properties transferred over and through. So I'll keep you updated in regards to that, where the status of those are. Mr. Callahan?
Okay, thank you, Mr. President, through you. I just want to say, Marcus Madison, thank you for your service to the city. Thank you for your service to the Fifth Ward. You've come a long way. We appreciate your good work, and I wish you well in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Sarah?
I'll echo all that, and also just want to add that when I first got started on council, you were such a great help to me as far as a mentor and even on the campaign. And not only do I have a lot of respect for you as a council person, but as a friend.
Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. President, through you. Marcus, I wish you nothing but the best. I've enjoyed working with you.
Take it off.
I hate that thing. I think that we did good work on the CDBG money. We got good things for our residents, so I really enjoyed working with you on that. I wish you much success as you move forward. Thank you.
And I'll echo those comments. I think across the board, I'm not going to speak, but everyone else can have their opportunity. But Marcus, your leadership and experience in the Fifth Ward and just throughout our community has been impeccable. You are a driven young man, and I wish you the best of luck. I wish you would stay and reconsider that, because you're valuable to the Fifth Ward, not only to there but to the city. So I wish you nothing but the best and good luck to you, my friend.
Thank you.
Brenda?
Thank you, Mr. President, and I echo that. The Fifth Ward, surely, I miss you.
No, thank you.
And thank you for serving with us. I've enjoyed you. We've worked on projects together. And in your life moving forward, young man, go forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Baird?
Yeah, and Marcus, good luck. When Marcus first started, he came to me since I was the oldest, longest serving and oldest, and I was the youngest initially. Then he comes in, takes my place. So I thought maybe you'd stay on, see if you could go for another. Good luck to you, and thank you for your service.
Ms. Keys?
I just want to say that I've known Marcus for a very long time, long before he was on this council, and I considered you a mentor and a colleague, and I'm really going to miss you and congratulate you on your new position.
Thank you.
And echoing everyone else's sentiments, you will be greatly missed.
Thank you, thank you.
Mr. Tolet?
Marcus, I wish you all the best. I think the trait that defines you is gentleman. You represent that as well as anyone I've ever met, so thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Yes, Marcus, congratulations and good luck, and don't be a stranger.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Mr. Oswald?
Mr. Madison, I'm sorry you're leaving because I was just getting ready to do a big project with you and the virus hit. I'm sure you'll probably involved when we get going with our new fifth ward person. And so, of course, I wish you all the best. And I just wanted everybody to know that I'm very happy that we're moving forward with the fountain. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to take a moment to say it's been an honor to serve with all of you. You know, my grandpa Joe moved here from the South to leave the segregated Jim Crow laws behind, and that journey brought him all the way here to the city of Elyria, where he was looking for better opportunities for his family. So for me to have the opportunity to sit in the seat and represent the ward that he has called home has been one of my greatest honors. I want to thank all of you. I can't believe 10 years have gone so quickly. When I was 21, I remember Mr. Baird said he had shoes older than me when I arrived here. Also, I remember Mr. Billman's overcooked, well-done hamburgers that I ended up taking home from one of the festivities that we had there. And also Mr. Art Weber, who would help me put signs up in my ward. So that feeling of running and being able to represent stays with me. To the administration and to all the new council members, I wish you all the best, and I really pray and hope that you all find your own pathways here as you navigate some of the challenges that we face here in the city and also in your ward. I also want to thank the residents of the Fifth Ward for putting their trust in me to represent them for over the last 10 years. I believe, you know, we've done some really good work together as council and also as a city. So I do want to share, because I know that there's been a lot of questions about what does this mean for me. As I look forward to the future, I'm not getting ahead of myself. I'm making decisions day by day at this point. But I do look forward to staying here in the city of Elyria and moving day by day to make what is the best decision for me moving forward. I'll be working with the Community West Foundation to advance their mission, to really work on the health and well-being of our entire community. This is 100% my decision. I was very thankful that the employer did not make me have to choose between city council or working for the foundation. But for me right now, I think this is the perfect time during this moment of transition. But more importantly, as we all work together to move this city forward, I believe there's great things on the horizon as we all come together to pass this year 6, and more importantly, try to unify all of our different groups that are wanting to be a part and involved. So thank you for the opportunity to serve. As I told the papers, the wheels are down. I can see the runway, and I'm looking forward to landing this plane. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Very good. Thanks again, Mr. Madison. If there's nothing more,
I move we adjourn.
moved by Mr. Baird, second by Ms. Mitchell. Any further discussion? Question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.